So I'm looking at this really cool website, Sherrod Brown, Sherrod Brown, BROWN.com, where I can sign up to say no to Citizens United. That is really great. And there's a lot of stuff about what's going on in Ohio and around the country. Let's check this guy out. Senator Sherrod Brown on the line with us. His official website is brown.senate.gov as well. Senator Brown, welcome.
Good to be back. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for joining us.
You quote the last time I was on, or two times, you quoted the eve of destruction, and
yes,
one of my kids' favorites. My two daughters, it's one of their favorite songs, and they were so excited that you quoted it, and I knew it, and I was able to quote a line back. And I'm not usually that good on music. Thank you for that.
You're
you made
welcome.
Me look, my kids are grown, but you made me look good in their eyes, which is not an easy thing.
That is great. I am glad. I was pretty impressed. I got to tell you, because that was one of my favorite songs when I was a teenager. When I was a kid, a teenager. Anyhow, Senator Brown, you are. I think you have perhaps a unique distinction, or certainly probably among the most unique, in that you're a genuine progressive, a Democrat running for re-election, and because of that, and you've got the guy running against you, Ellen Ratner, is with Talk Radio News. She's on our show pretty much every day, and she's a good friend, and it's her. She refers to him as her crazy cousin Josh, I think, or Howie, or whatever his name is, Josh, right?
Yes.
Yes. And
her words, crazy cousin, not mine. But,
yes,
okay.
Yes, of course. and it's remarkable to me that a fellow who is so remarkably unqualified, and you've got the information on your website over SherrodBrown.com, is pulling in millions, well over $10 million in money, attacking you to get another. Basically, I think they just want to have another Republican in the Senate, another warm seat, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, it's a couple things. It's money is so readily available to them because it's unreported, it's unrestricted. So we figure it's oil companies because I've taken on their taxpayer-funded handouts. We figure it's companies that ship jobs overseas to China because of our China currency bill to level the playing field. We figure it's Wall Street mega banks because my legislation to break up the banks. So, one oil company, one billionaire can write a check for $2 million, $5 million, $10 million, and you hear those stories. You can't trace it, but they're up to $18 million in Ohio, and they don't really care who in some ways they don't even care who their candidate is as long as they can beat a progressive in the Senate. But I mean that's a concern. But if you stand up and you stand for something, the voters reward you, and in the end, that's what our grassroots effort's all about, and that's what I do as a candidate, as I try to do in the Senate.
Well, and I think that this is one of the really important lessons, if I can digress just a little bit. I'm curious to get your take on this. For the Democratic Party, is that the genuine progressive people like you and Jan Schakowsky and others who she's in the House, you're in the Senate, who really and truly stand for their values, as opposed to, I'm not going to name any names here, but as opposed to, we all know that there are a few Democrats out there who are basically indistinguishable from moderate Republicans, or even in some cases crazy Republicans. And I don't get it how those folks think that they can win a campaign. Who's gonna show up and vote for somebody who doesn't have the courage of their convictions?
Well, I agree with that, and that's what I believe, and that's what I do. But I think when you run for office, when I ran for the Senate in 2006. My wife and I made a decision early in that race in the fall of 2005 that we were going to run a campaign where we wouldn't kind of do this move to the middle, stand for nothing kind of pablum, and you'd stick to your principles. And you don't have, for one thing, you don't have to remember tomorrow what you said today if you actually stand for something and believe it.
Right.
And it doesn't mean you don't compromise on issues in Congress, but it does when you're working on legislation. But what it means is you don't compromise on principle, and you stand for something. And the voters don't look at left or right, who's liberal, who's conservative. They look at whose side are you on.
Yeah.
And progressives are on the side of Main Street when it comes to Wall Street issues, and progressives are on the side of consumers and when it comes to oil companies, and progressives are on the side of workers when it comes to outsourcing jobs to China. And it's all pretty clear. And to me, I know plenty of conservative voters and independent voters that don't think of themselves as Democrats that like what I do, in opposition to NAFTA 20 years ago, or like what I do standing up on China trade enforcement. And that's one of the reasons the president's numbers are getting better in Ohio. He's made decisions in the White House on trade that have resulted in a steel mill in Lorraine and more production, more tire production in Findlay, because in both Ohio cities, because he has stood up for American workers. And in the end, I know a lot of conservatives that vote for people like me because we stand up for those issues that matter to everyday Americans in their everyday lives.
You know, it's a real tell on how bizarre the Republican Party has become when you look back on the Dwight Eisenhower presidency, and you know, so much epitomized in that 1954 letter to his brother Edgar, where he talked about these oil billionaires down in Texas, or millionaires they were back then, who thought that they could do away with labor laws, protections for organized labor, and they could do away with Social Security and successfully and privatize it. And he said, you know, their number is small and they are stupid. I mean, Dwight Eisenhower was in favor of a reasonable top marginal tax rate on millionaires and billionaires. He was in favor of corporations paying their share back then, and they were paying over 30% of total revenues into the Treasury. He was in favor of a trade policy that favored American companies. He was in favor of protecting consumers. He was a Republican.
Yeah, well, that's why I love your show, Tom, to come up with that. I did not know about that 1954 letter. And that kind of, I know a good bit about Eisenhower now. Yeah, he would not. I mean, Reagan would barely be allowed in this party in some ways now, let alone Eisenhower. I mean, it really is tragic because the Republicans are not. I mean, I know a number of Republicans have come to me and said the party's left me. I'm still fiscally fairly conservative, but on social issues, on labor issues, on trade, I mean, just one thing after another. And it's sad for the country because there aren't two reasonable people or two reasonable philosophies debated now. And when the other side, they win elections by playing to fear. It was fear of communism in those days with McCarthy, and it's fear of immigrants and fear of terrorism and all that. There are legitimate problems, obviously, and terrorism is a terrible thing, but they win elections based on playing to people's fears instead of lifting up. And that's really, to me, what campaigns are about, trying to lift people up, inspiring them. We do this right, we'll have more middle-class jobs. We do manufacturing right, more families will be able to send their kids to college and buy a home and buy a car. Everybody will be better off instead of this 47% that, they're all whatever Governor Romney said they were. And it's too bad that we don't see that. Campaigns are tough and they're nasty, but they can be more inspiring than they've been because one party is just so extreme now.
Yeah, and one of the things that I love about your campaign and your work is that when Republicans are willing to reach out to you, you will work with them. You're not one of these hyper-partisan crazies, and yet at the same time you are true to your values.
Yeah, and
I really honor that.
Well, thank you for that. And you can do lots of things, Michael. You can find issues. One of the things that we did that I'm most proud of in my it's minor to most people, but there was a terrible bus crash in Bluffton. The Bluffton College baseball team was going to spring training and the bus crashed in Georgia, and 7 players and managers and the bus driver and his wife were killed. And I teamed up with a Republican from Texas, Kay Bailey Hutchinson, and her state had suffered some people in her state had suffered a similar terrible accident. And we were able, over the objections of Tom Coburn, who for whatever reason stopped the bill for
Dr.
a period of time. We were able to get a bus safety. We have good safety rules for cars now in this country, and good safety rules in flight, but we didn't have them in buses, and now we do, as the president signed it. And it's one of those examples of where government can work with the private sector and make people's lives better. That's really what in the last 100 years we've done on safe drinking water and clean air and Medicare and auto safety, and it's something to really be proud of.
Yep, absolutely. That's Sherrod Brown, Senator Sherrod Brown, sherrodbrown.com, brown.senate.gov. Senators, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Tom, and you too. Thanks,
Always
Tom.
great talking with you. 16 minutes past the